name is Daniel Mercer, and I have been working in the coal mines of West Virginia for most of my adult life. At the time I am writing this account, I am 37 years old, though the years underground have added a permanent weight to my bones that makes me feel much older. My father mined before me, as did his father before him. It is not an occupation one usually chooses out of ambition, but out of inheritance and circumstance. Where I was born, in the narrow hollers carved between black ridges and quiet streams, there were not many roads a man could walk if he wanted to provide for his family. The mine was there, always there, and sooner or later it called to you, the way the mountains themselves do, with a voice that brooks no argument. I want to make something clear before I go on. This is not just a story about coal dust, back-breaking work, or the sort of tragedies you might read about in newspapers when a shaft collapses or an explosion takes a dozen lives. Those dangers are real enough, and I have seen them with my own eyes. But there is something else beneath these mountains, something older than any company, older than any man who ever swung a pick down here. The rules we are given when we first enter the mine are not just about safety. They are instructions for survival, yes, but survival against things most people do not believe exist. When I first began, I was 19, still wary and impatient, carrying more pride than sense. My father was already slowing down, coughing black phlegm into his handkerchief each morning, the sickness creeping into his lungs after decades in the shafts. He did not want me to go underground. He tried to keep me in school, told me I could work on engines or maybe drive trucks. But there is a strange pull that comes with knowing your family's history is carved out of coal. I ignored his warnings, like so many sons ignore their fathers. The first day I walked down into the mine, I expected danger of a sort, but not the kind that came. The foreman, a thick-shouldered man named Curtis Hale, gathered me and the other new hires together in a break room that smelled of oil and damp stone. His eyes were hard, his mouth a thin line beneath a patchy mustache. He carried a binder under his arm, and when he set it down, he did not speak of wages or hours. He spoke of rules. There are rules to this mine, he said, his voice echoing in the concrete chamber. Some are written by the company. Some are written by the mountain. You break either set, and you won't last long. Pay attention. He listed the obvious ones first. Never remove your helmet. Always check your lamp battery before your shift. Do not wander from your assigned section. Those were the same as in any mine. But then he grew quieter, leaning forward on the table, and the men who had been there longest lowered their eyes, as though the words themselves carried weight. Rule 1, Hale said. If you hear tapping that does not come from your crew, do not answer. Keep working. Do not look toward the sound. Rule 2, if you find an old lantern burning where no man should be, do not touch it. Do not snuff it out. Turn back the way you came. Rule 3, when you reach the end of your shift, if your path out seems longer than it should be, keep walking. Do not take side tunnels. Do not speak to anyone you meet until you see daylight. There were more, some stranger than the last. Do not whistle underground. Do not pick up stones that shine blue in your lamp. If a man calls your name but you cannot see his face, do not respond. I remember glancing around at the others, trying to suppress my smirk. It felt like hazing, like the way older men scare rookies with ghost tales. But their expressions were not playful. Even the hardest men in the room carried a shadow of fear in their eyes. My amusement faded. My father's words came back to me then. He had told me the mountain remembers everything, that it eats the dead and keeps them close. I had thought it was poetry, the kind of mountain wisdom old folks pass down with their moonshine. But when Hale closed the binder and dismissed us, there was no mistaking the sincerity. That first week underground, I did my best to put the rules out of my mind. The tunnels were close, oppressive, and every noise echoed like it came from just over your shoulder. Timber groaned, water dripped, men coughed and cursed. It was easy to imagine tapping in the distance, easy to imagine voices. But soon enough, I learned imagination had nothing to do with it. It happened on my third night shift. I was assigned with two older miners, Henry Dale and Marcus Boone. Both had been down there over a decade, and they carried themselves with a quiet resignation I mistook for indifference. We worked a seam 2 miles into the mountain, the air thick with dust despite the fans. My lamp beam cut a narrow tunnel of light in the blackness. The only sounds were picks striking rock, the shuffle of boots, and the occasional clatter of falling coal into the carts. Then, faint but sharp, came a steady rhythm. Tap, tap. I froze. The sound was not the random groan of shifting stone. It was measured, deliberate, coming from the tunnel wall to my left. I glanced at Henry, expecting him to notice. His face tightened, but he did not stop his swing. Marcus, too, kept working, his jaw clenched. The tapping grew louder, closer, like someone knocking from inside the wall. My instinct screamed to call out, to ask if someone was trapped. But then I remembered Hale's words, "Do not answer." The hair on my neck prickled. I forced myself to keep moving, my pick striking stone in a clumsy rhythm that did not match the knock. My breathing grew ragged inside my mask. The sound lasted for minutes, then stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Neither Henry nor Marcus said a word about it. When the cart was full, we wheeled it back without speaking. Later, in the locker room, I asked Henry what the tapping had been. He spat black phlegm into a drain and shook his head. "Best not to wonder," he said. That was all. Over the following weeks, more rules proved themselves true. I saw a lantern burning at a dead end, an old style with soot, stained glass. No one had carried it in, no one claimed it. Its flame burned without smoke. Marcus steered me away from it with a hand on my shoulder, his eyes fixed straight ahead. We did not speak of it again. I heard my name whispered once, drawn out long and low, when I was alone clearing rubble. I turned, lamp sweeping across empty tunnel, heart hammering. There was no one there. I bit my tongue to keep from answering. Each time something happened, I thought of my father coughing in his chair, his eyes distant as though he still saw the dark walls pressing around him. I began to understand why he never wanted me here. The worst came one morning near the end of my shift. We had been working deeper than usual, in a section that smelled of sulfur and wet stone. My lamp flickered, though the battery had been charged. The tunnel seemed longer than I remembered, every step stretching into 2. Henry walked ahead of me, his shoulders slumped. I felt the panic rise, the certainty that we were lost. Then I remembered Hale's third rule: keep walking. Do not take side tunnels. Do not speak to anyone until you see daylight. So I walked. My breath grew shallow, my chest tight, but I kept my eyes forward. The tunnel wound on and on, longer than any shaft had a right to be. My legs ached, and more than once I thought of turning back, but there was no back anymore, only darkness. At last, a faint glow appeared ahead. I staggered toward it, each step heavier than the last, until the cold air of morning hit my face, and I emerged from the mine mouth into the pale light of dawn. Henry was there beside me, silent, his face drawn and pale. Neither of us said anything. We simply walked to the locker room, changed in silence, and left. That night I dreamed of tunnels that twisted like the insides of a serpent, walls pulsing as though alive. I woke choking, the taste of coal dust thick on my tongue. By then, I knew the rules were not superstitions. They were warnings. And still, I could not leave. The mine had its hooks in me, same as it had in my father and grandfather. Work was scarce. Pay was necessary. And there was something else. Something I hesitate to admit even now. a fascination. The mountain was not only dangerous, it was alive. Every shift, I felt it breathing around me, its heart deep in the stone, beating slow and steady. And in that pulse was a voice, whispering things I could almost understand. I told myself I would learn to live with it, that as long as I followed the rules, I would be safe. But deep down, I knew the rules were not enough. The mind does not care for rules. It does not care for men. It swallows them, piece by piece, until nothing remains but dust and memory. And sometimes the memories walk. The second month in the mine taught me that the rules were not only for rare, extraordinary nights. They were for every shift, every hour, because the mountain always found ways to test you. It did not matter if you were seasoned or new. If you worked under its skin, you belonged to it. Some men accepted that without question. Others tried to fight it, and the mountain taught them quickly what defiance cost. I began to notice the older miners had a rhythm to the way they moved, a quiet caution that was not about the danger of rockfall or gas, but about something less visible. They never whistled, never hummed. They never touched the stones that shimmered faintly like frost under our lamps. When they passed through certain stretches of tunnel, they went quicker, eyes fixed forward, shoulders tight. They would not say why, but I felt that the air was colder there, too still, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. One evening, I learned another rule the hard way. It was not in Hale's binder, not written anywhere, but whispered afterward by Henry in the locker room. We had been hauling carts late in the shift, the work tedious, our muscles aching from repetition. I lagged behind, tired, my lamp beam bouncing across the tunnel floor. That was when I saw it. Something small, glittering among the coal fragments. A stone the size of my thumb, glowing faintly blue as though it held the memory of lightning. I bent down and picked it up without thinking. The moment my skin touched it, the temperature around me dropped. My breath puffed white, my ears filled with a low hum, almost like singing, coming from inside the stone itself. For a moment, I felt strange peace, as though the mountain had chosen me. Then the hum turned into a whisper, my name, drawn out in a voice that sounded like my father's, though he was miles away, coughing in his chair. Daniel. The stone vibrated in my palm. Panic surged. I dropped it, and it rolled into the dark. The cold lifted, the whisper stopped, and the tunnel returned to itself. Henry was standing a few feet away, his expression grim. He had seen me. He shook his head. "Never touch what shines," he muttered. "That's how the mountain marks you." I wanted to argue, to ask what would happen if I had kept it. But the look in his eyes silenced me. That night, I dreamed of my father again, but this time his mouth opened wide, too wide, and coal dust poured from it until I woke choking in the dark. The rules began to live in me after that. I no longer questioned them. They were as natural as breathing still. The mine had more to show me. It was late January when Curtis Hale gathered us at the start of a shift and told us about the missing crew. 4 men from the next hollow over had not returned from a night shift. Their carts were found, half filled, their helmets and lamps abandoned in a side tunnel. No bodies, no signs of collapse, just gone. "We'll be rerouting for a while," Hale said, his voice low, "until we figure if it's gas or worse. Keep to your assigned sections, and remember the rules. Always the rules. No one asked questions. No one ever did when men disappeared. The mine did not always give bodies back. I could not get it out of my head, though. 4 men, just gone. I asked Marcus if he had known them. He said yes, quietly, as if naming them might draw attention. He told me one of them had been new, only a month in, and had a habit of whistling. Didn't last long, he said flatly. The mine had a way of making examples. A week later, I was the one nearly claimed. It happened during a night shift when the crew was split, half of us loading carts, the other half clearing rubble near a collapsed passage. I was alone for a few minutes, shoveling coal fragments, when I heard footsteps behind me, heavy boots crunching. "Henry?" I asked, turning, but the tunnel was empty. The footsteps continued, circling me though no one was there. My lamp flickered, shadows bending unnaturally against the walls. Then a voice spoke my name, not whispered this time, but firm, close, as though someone stood right beside me. "Daniel." I froze, every muscle locked. I remembered Hale's words, "Do not speak to anyone until you see daylight, especially if you cannot see their face." The voice came again. "Daniel, come this way." It sounded like my own voice. That was the worst of it. My own tone, my own inflection. The hair on my arms lifted. I gripped the shovel tighter, staring into the dark. My instincts screamed to answer, to demand what it wanted. But my body stayed still, breath shallow, until the voice faded and the footsteps stopped. When Henry returned, I said nothing. But he looked at me for a long moment, as if he knew. That night, I could not sleep. The idea that something down there could wear my voice, could call me like a brother or a friend, gnawed at me. I began to wonder if the rules were not meant to protect us from the mountain, but to keep us from joining it. The days above ground grew stranger too. Sometimes, I would come home and find coal dust on my boots, even after I had scrubbed them clean. Sometimes, I woke at night and heard tapping beneath the floorboards of my house, faint but steady, as though the mine reached out even here. My father saw the change in me. One evening, while he sat wheezing by the stove, he said, "You've heard it, haven't you? The voices." I froze. "You knew?" He nodded, his eyes cloudy. "They called me too. That's why I told you never to go down there. Once you hear them, you belong to them. The mountain doesn't forget." I wanted to ask him how he had survived all those years, but he only coughed until his chest rattled and waved me away. The mind did not wait long before pressing further. It was during a shift change near dawn, when we were making our way out. The tunnel stretched ahead, longer than it had any right to be. I remembered the third rule: keep walking, do not take side tunnels, do not speak to anyone. The men trudged in silence, lamps bobbing. But then I saw a figure ahead, standing in the middle of the tunnel. Too far to make out, but clearly a man. "Hold up," I muttered, but no one else seemed to hear. They kept walking, eyes down, as if blind to what stood there. The figure raised its hand, not a wave, more like a beckon. A slow curl of fingers. My throat tightened. My legs wanted to obey, to step toward it, but I forced them forward instead. Step by step, heart pounding, I walked past. My lamp beam brushed across it. For a split second, I saw my own face staring back at me, pale and hollow-eyed. Then it vanished into the dark. By the time we reached daylight, my hands were shaking. I could not bring myself to tell the others what I had seen. That day I made a mistake. Told myself I would skip the next shift, just one night, to catch my breath. But when night fell, I felt a pull stronger than duty. It was not the company, not the wages. It was the mountain itself calling me back. I lay in bed, staring at the steeple, hearing faint tapping through the walls. At last I rose dressed and walked back to the mine long after my shift had begun. The gate was closed, but the air carried the smell of coal and damp earth, a smell that now felt more like home than my own house. I stood there, staring into the black mouth of the shaft, and I swear I heard my name again. This time, I almost answered. I do not know how long I stood there before I forced myself away. But even as I walked back through the sleeping town, the whispers followed, threading through the trees, echoing off the mountainsides. The rules kept me alive in the tunnels, but what terrified me most was realizing they could not protect me above ground. Because once the mountain marked you, there was no leaving it behind. The weeks after that night blurred together, the shifts blending into one long descent and return, as if daylight itself were nothing more than a brief hallucination. I woke with coal dust in my throat, ate bread that tasted faintly of stone, and dreamed of tunnels that twisted without end. Above ground, the world grew smaller, quieter, while below it stretched forever. The mine had claimed me, though I still clung to the idea that I could resist, that the rules would keep me tethered to myself. But the rules were not enough when the mine wanted something. It began with a sound deeper than tapping, a low rumble that carried through the walls like a slow heartbeat. We were 2 miles down, the air hot and wet, when it started. Marcus dropped his pick mid-swing, his face pale in the lamplight. Henry muttered under his breath, words I could not catch. The rumble grew louder, steady, as though some massive machine turned behind the rock. But there were no machines that deep, no engines strong enough to shake the mountain that way. We stood still, listening, our lamps flickering. Then the hum began again, the same that had come from the glowing stone I had once picked up. Except now it filled the tunnel, vibrating in my bones, pulling at my chest like a rope tied around my heart. Henry barked, eyes down. Keep working. Don't listen, but how could I not? The hum became words, faint but clear, threaded between the thrum of rock. My name over and over. Daniel. Daniel. My hands shook as I gripped the pick. I felt myself sway, leaning toward the wall, as though something on the other side waited for me. The glow of blue light shimmered faintly in the cracks, veins of stone pulsing like arteries. Marcus grabbed my arm, yanking me back. His eyes were wide, full of a fear I had never seen in him before. Don't, he hissed. That's how it gets you. The rumble ceased as quickly as it had begun, leaving silence heavy in its wake. My ears rang, my heart pounding. No one spoke for the rest of that shift. Later, in the locker room, Marcus finally leaned close and whispered, "The mountain, it's not just coal and stone. It's alive, hungry, and it knows your name now." I wanted to tell him I already knew. The rules suddenly seemed less like guardrails and more like prayers. Fragile words in the face of something that could never be truly controlled. 2 nights later, the mine took another man. It was Jacob Lyle, a quiet worker with 3 children at home. We had been loading carts together, his lamp a steady glow beside me. One moment he was there, swinging his pick into the seam. The next his light flickered and went out. I heard him shout once, sharp and panicked. By the time we rushed to where he had stood, there was nothing. No body, no sign of collapse, only his helmet lying cracked on the stone floor. The foreman sealed the tunnel for safety concerns, but everyone knew better. We all avoided speaking Jacob's name, as if doing so might bring him back in ways none of us wanted. Walking home under the narrow stars, I saw a lantern burning at the edge of the road. Old glass, soot black and glowing faintly yellow. My chest tightened. Rule 2. Do not touch, do not snuff, turn back. But I was not underground now. This was my road, the dirt path that led past my father's house. And yet, the lantern burned anyway. I circled wide around it, my steps quick, my eyes locked forward. Even as I passed, the flame flared, throwing shadows across the trees. For a moment, I thought I saw Jacob's face in the glass, his eyes wide, his mouth moving silently. Then it was gone. I barely slept that night. Every time my eyes closed, I saw him staring at me from behind the glass. The next day, my father asked if I had been near the mine after my shift. His voice was weak, but his eyes sharp. I lied, said no. He watched me, his chest rattling with each breath, then looked away. You can't lie to it, he said softly. It already knows. That evening, Hale called me into his office. He was a hard man, not given to wasting words. He lit a cigarette, his eyes shadowed. "You've been marked," he said simply. I stared, unsure whether to deny it. He blew smoke toward the ceiling. "Don't bother. I can see it in your face. The mountain's got your name now. Men like you don't last." "Then why keep me down there?" I asked, my voice raw. He gave a humorless smile. "Because once it chooses, there's no leaving. You'd hear it no matter where you went. At least here, with the rules, you have a chance." His words clung to me like coal dust. That night's shift pressed the truth deeper. I was working near the older tunnels, those cut decades before my birth, when my lamp beam fell on something carved into the wall. Letters scratched into the stone. A name. Daniel Mercer. My knees weakened. I reached out, touched the grooves with trembling fingers. The letters were old, the edges worn, as if they had been here for years. Longer than I had been alive. Behind me, the air stirred. I turned quickly, but the tunnel was empty. Still, I felt breath against my neck, cold and steady. I fled back to the crew, saying nothing. Sleep became impossible after that. I lay awake, listening to the house creak, the faint echo of tapping beneath the floor. My father grew worse, his coughing constant, but when I tried to speak of the things I had seen, he only shook his head. "Don't give it voice," he whispered. "Don't feed it." I tried to obey, but silence was no shield. One dawn, after a shift that seemed to stretch for eternity, I emerged into the pale gray light and saw footprints circling the mine entrance. Bare footprints, pressed deep into the mud. Though the snow around them remained untouched, they led nowhere, began nowhere, just circled again and again like someone pacing for hours. The others pretended not to see. I could not look away. Later that day, Marcus came to my house. He looked gaunt, eyes sunken, as though he had not slept for weeks. He sat at my table, hands trembling as he poured coffee. "You have to listen," he said. "The rules, they don't save you. They only delay. Once it knows you, it doesn't let go." "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying men disappear because the mountain takes them. It calls, and if you answer, even once, you're gone. But if you don't, if you resist, sometimes it keeps calling anyway. Until you're hollow, until you're nothing." His words left a chill in me deeper than any tunnel draft. "Then what's left? What do we do?" Marcus stared into his cup, coal-stained fingers shaking. "Pray it wants someone else more." That night, I walked past my father's door and heard him murmuring in his sleep my name. Over and over, whispered like prayer. I leaned close, heart thudding. His lips moved, forming the word again, "Daniel." But his eyes were shut tight. He was not speaking to me. He was speaking to it. I stood there in the dark, frozen, until his breath rattled and he fell silent again. I realized then that the mountain did not just claim men underground. It carried them home, into their houses, into their dreams, into their families, and now it had mine. The next shift, I broke a rule. I told myself I was only curious, only testing the line. We were near a collapsed section, hauling rubble, when I heard it again. Tapping. This time it came in a clear pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Like a code. I knew the rule, do not answer. But my hands moved before my mind could stop them. I lifted my pick and struck the wall 3 times. Silence. Then, from the other side, 3 knocks answered back. Henry's face went white. "What have you done?" he hissed. Before I could speak, the wall shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The air grew cold, and from the cracks between stones, blue light seeped out, pulsing like veins. A voice spoke my name, not in a whisper but in a chorus. Dozens of voices layered together. My father's, Jacob's, my own. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but the sound filled the tunnel, shaking the ground. The others grabbed me, dragged me away as the light flared brighter, shadows stretching across the walls. We fled, leaving tools behind, our lamps swinging wildly. When we reached the main shaft, Hale was waiting. He looked at me, his jaw clenched, then turned away. "Shield it," he ordered. Men moved without question, stacking timbers, closing the tunnel. But even as they worked, I could hear my name echoing faintly from behind the rock, muffled but insistent. That night, lying in my bed, the echoes did not stop. They followed me into sleep, into every corner of my mind. The rules had kept me safe until now, but I had broken one, and the mountain does not forgive. After I broke the rule, nothing was the same. I carried the sound of that knocking with me, the way it answered mine. It echoed not only in my ears but in my bones, rattling in my chest when I tried to sleep. I could still feel the vibration of the pick against stone, the moment the wall seemed to breathe back at me. I had touched something I was never meant to touch, and I knew it. The others knew too. Henry wouldn't look me in the eye. Marcus avoided standing near me in the tunnels. Even Hale, who rarely showed fear of anything, studied me like a man deciding whether to bury dynamite or throw it in the fire. The silence around me felt heavier than the rock pressing down overhead. The worst of it was at home. My father grew restless at night, murmuring in his sleep. He no longer whispered my name alone. Sometimes I caught fragments of other words, sounds that didn't belong to English. When I leaned closer, I could almost recognize them. The syllables were shaped like echoes, like the hum of stone. And then, 3 nights after I knocked, I woke to tapping on my bedroom wall. Not a dream, not imagination, clear as rain on a tin roof. 3 taps. Pause 3 taps. I sat frozen, sweat sliding cold down my neck. The wall that separated my room from the hallway seemed thinner than paper. The knocks came again, patient, waiting. I clenched my teeth, fighting the urge to answer. Every muscle in me remembered the rhythm, the way it had answered before. My hand twitched toward the nightstand, as though I could pick up a tool and strike back, but I stayed still, fists clenched, breath shallow. The knocking continued for hours. I did not sleep. By morning, my father was gone. I searched the house in panic, calling his name, but the bed was empty, his blankets kicked aside. On the table, his old helmet sat polished, lamps still attached, though he hadn't been underground in years. His boots were gone. I ran to the mine, heart hammering, and found Hale already there, standing grim, faced at the entrance. He looked at me once, then shook his head slowly. "You went in," he said. I could not understand it. My father could barely walk across the room without coughing blood, and yet he had gone into the mine, on his own. Hale lit a cigarette, hands steady. The mountain called him. Happens to the old ones sometimes. When it wants them back, I wanted to scream, to demand we search. But the look on Hale's face stopped me. He had seen this before. He knew what it meant. That night, I dreamed of my father's boots walking down the tunnel ahead of me empty, moving on their own. The soles echoed against the stone, and though I ran to catch them, I never could. The mine did not let me grieve. There were still shifts to work, still coal to pull from the earth. The company cared nothing for the missing, only for the carts filled and the quotas met. So I went back underground, each step heavier. The rules a litany I muttered under my breath like prayer. But the mountain remembered. We were deep in a new section when I saw the lantern again. Old glass, flame burning steady without smoke, perched on a ledge above the cart tracks. Marcus stiffened beside me, his jaw tight. "Keep moving," he said quickly. But I could not. My feet slowed. My lamp beam caught the flame, and within it I thought I saw a face. My father's face. His mouth moved, shaping my name. "Daniel." I stumbled toward it, hands outstretched, but Marcus grabbed me hard. His grip was like iron, yanking me back. "Don't. It's not him." I struggled, eyes locked on the lantern. The flame flickered, and for an instant the face inside twisted, hollow-eyed. lips curling into a smile that was not my father's. Then the light winked out, leaving only darkness. Marcus shoved me forward. "It will wear every voice you love," he said. "That's how it pulls you deeper." I did not argue. I could not. But a seed had already been planted. What if it had been him? What if he was trapped inside, waiting for me to bring him back? That thought haunted me more than the faces in the flame. The rules were harder to follow after that. Each shift, the mountain found new ways to test me. Whispers in my own voice. Footsteps that followed me alone. Glimpses of pale figures in the corner of my lamp, gone when I turned. And then came the longest tunnel. We were finishing a night shift, the men wary, ready to see daylight. But as we walked out, the shaft stretched longer and longer, until it seemed we had been walking for hours. My legs ached, my throat dry, but the exit never came. The others trudged on silently, heads down, but I saw something they did not. A side tunnel to the left, glowing faintly blue. And in that glow, I saw my father's silhouette. He lifted a hand, beckoning. The third rule thundered in my skull: keep walking. Do not take side tunnels. Do not speak until you see daylight. But the shape in the glow was him. His shoulders, his gait, even the way his head tilted slightly as though listening. "Dad," I whispered before I could stop myself. The figure turned. Its face was mine. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. The others kept walking, never noticing. I forced myself forward, eyes shut, muttering the rules under my breath. At last, pale morning hit my skin, and I collapsed outside, gasping like a drowning man. After that, I knew the truth of what Marcus had said. The rules did not save you. They only delayed the taking, and the mountain wanted me. It grew bolder above ground. I began to see shadows move where no shadows should be, flickering across my house even when no lamp burned. Tapping followed me into town, faint but insistent. Sometimes, when I passed the church, I heard a low hum rising from beneath the ground, the same vibration that had called me once before. The townsfolk pretended not to notice. Everyone here lived under the same shadow, but silence was our only weapon. If you admitted the mind touched you, it meant you were already half gone. Still, I was not silent. I began to ask questions. I cornered Hale one evening as he locked the office, demanded to know how long he had known about the rules. His face tightened. "Longer than you've been alive," he said. "Then why keep sending men down there?" I asked. "Why not shut it down?" He gave a dry laugh. "Shut it down? You don't shut down the mountain. You think the company runs this place?"
No.
"The company just feeds it men. That's the bargain. Always has been." His words chilled me more than the tunnels ever had. That night, I returned home to find a lantern burning on my porch. I stood staring at it, my heart pounding. The flame flickered, shadows curling along the walls. Inside the glass, I saw my own reflection, but its mouth was moving, whispering words I could not hear. I did not touch it. I did not snuff it out. I turned and walked into the night, leaving my house behind. The mine had followed me home. There was no leaving it now. I wandered the dark streets until dawn, listening to the mountains breathe around me. The ridges loomed like black teeth, the hollers deep as open graves. I realized then what my father had meant: the mountain remembers everything. It does not just eat men, it keeps them, and I had fed it. I could feel it inside me, the weight of stone pressing down, the hum in my chest. I was part of it now, whether I wanted to be or not. Still, some part of me clung to the rules. If I followed them, maybe I could last. Maybe I could resist a little longer. But another part whispered that it was useless, that the mountain had already written my name in its walls, and names carved in stone do not fade. I did not return home after that night with the lantern on my porch. I could not. Something in me understood that the house was no longer mine, no longer safe. It was only another mouth of the mountain now, another place where it could whisper to me in the dark. I spent the night wandering the back roads, listening to the tapping that followed at the edges of my hearing, until exhaustion forced me to lie down beneath a blackened oak and wait for morning. When the dawn came pale and gray, I made my way back to the mine. Not because I wanted to, but because there was nowhere else left to go. Every path in this town led back to the mountain. Every road wound into its shadow. The mine was the only constant, the only place where the rules still gave me the illusion of safety. The men were quieter than usual that day. Jacob's disappearance still hung heavy. My father's absence unspoken but obvious. No one asked me where I had been the night before. They didn't need to. They could see it in my eyes. The mountain had me in its grip. We descended into the shaft, lamps glowing against the dark. The tunnels breathed cool air, carrying with them the familiar smell of damp rock and dust. But beneath that smell was something new, something metallic, like blood on iron. The deeper we went, the stronger it grew. Henry muttered a prayer under his breath, his hands trembling on the handle of his pick. Marcus kept glancing back at me, as though I were a danger greater than the tunnels themselves. I wanted to tell him he was right. We were working a seam near an old section, the walls scarred by cuts made decades ago. My lamp fell across more carvings etched into the stone. Names, dozens of them. Some I recognized, men who had gone missing in my own time. Others were older, their letters half-worn, names no one had spoken in years. Among them was mine again, Daniel Mercer, etched deeper now, fresher. The grooves were sharp, as though carved only recently. My hands shook when I touched them. The stone was warm, pulsing faintly beneath my fingertips, like living flesh. "Don't!" Marcus snapped, yanking me back. "Don't touch what belongs to it." I wanted to argue, but my throat closed. The truth was written in front of me. The mountain didn't just take men. It kept their names carved into its bones, marking them as its own. The rules had not saved me. They had only delayed the carving of my name. That shift, the whispers were relentless. Every swing of my pick was echoed by a murmur in my ear, words layered in voices I knew. My father, Jacob, even myself. At times, I thought I heard laughter. At times, I thought I heard weeping. I worked in silence, forcing my body to obey the motions. But my mind was already slipping. At the end of the shift, the tunnel stretched long again. My legs ached, my eyes burned. The men trudged forward, but I lagged behind. I could feel it pulling at me, tugging me toward the side shafts, toward the glowing cracks in the stone. My lamp flickered, shadows bending into shapes that beckoned me closer. And then I saw him, my father, standing at the mouth of a side tunnel, his face pale, his eyes dark. He raised his hand, beckoning. His lips moved, shaping my name. I stopped dead, breath frozen in my chest. I knew the rule: do not take side tunnels. Do not speak until you see daylight. But it was him. His features, his stance, the slight stoop of his shoulders. I whispered before I could stop myself, "Dad?" He smiled. His teeth were black with coal dust, his eyes hollow. Then the figure shifted, and the face was mine. I stumbled back, bile rising. Marcus grabbed my arm and yanked me forward, his grip iron. "Don't look," he hissed. "Don't listen." I let him drag me, but my legs felt like lead. The air grew colder with every step, the whispers louder. By the time we reached daylight, I collapsed on the ground, shaking. Above ground, things only worsened. The tapping followed me everywhere now. On walls, on windows, on the earth beneath my feet. Sometimes, in the quiet between breaths, I thought I could feel it tapping inside my chest, matching the rhythm of my heart. The townsfolk avoided me. Mothers pulled their children away when I passed. Old men looked at me with pity, shaking their heads. They had seen this before. They knew what it meant. One evening, Marcus came to me again. He looked thinner than ever, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling. He sat at my table, staring into the dark. "You can't fight it forever," he said. "It doesn't let go. It never has. Once it knows your name, it writes you in stone." I swallowed hard. "Then why keep going down there?" He gave a hollow laugh. "Because where else would we go? The mountain doesn't stop calling just because you stay above ground. At least down there, the rules give you a little time." His words were not comfort. They were a sentence. That night, I dreamed of tunnels again. But this time, I was not walking them. I was the tunnel itself. My ribs were the beams, my veins the seams of coal. Men dug into me, their picks striking my bones. And deep inside, my heart hummed with a slow, steady beat that shook the walls. When I woke, my mouth was full of coal dust. I stopped pretending after that, pretending that I could resist, that the rules were enough, that daylight could save me. The mountain had me, and it was only a matter of time before it claimed me fully. The signs came faster. My reflection in the mirror lagged behind my movements. When I spoke, sometimes I heard an echo in a voice not my own. My shadow moved on its own, its arms lifting when mine were still, and always, always the tapping. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks, waiting. The men began to avoid me underground. They said little, but I could feel their fear. To them, I was already half gone, a man the mountain had marked. Someday, soon I would vanish mid-shift like Jacob, and my name would join the others carved in stone. But I did not vanish. Not yet. Instead, one night the mountain opened itself to me. We were deep in an old section, the air cold, our lamps dim. I lagged behind, the whispers pulling me toward a narrow crack in the wall. My feet moved before I could stop them, slipping through into a tunnel I had never seen before. The air was different here, thicker, humming with energy. The walls glowed faintly blue, veins of light running through the stone, and carved into those walls were names. Hundreds of them, thousands, some fresh, some worn, all etched deep, glowing faintly as though alive. I ran my hand across them, my fingers trembling. The stone pulsed beneath my skin, warm and steady. My name was there again, carved deeper than before, glowing brighter than the rest. Daniel. The voice came from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the floor, from inside my own chest. I spun, lamp swinging, but there was no one. Only shadows moving like breath across the stone. "Daniel," the voices said again. My father's voice. Jacob's voice, my own. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The tunnel pulsed around me, the light growing brighter. The humming filled my skull, vibrating my teeth, shaking me to my bones. And then I saw them. Figures emerging from the stone, pale, hollowed, their bodies half formed from coal and dust. Their faces were familiar, men I had known, men who had vanished, Jacob, others whose names I had seen carved into the walls. Even my father, his eyes empty, his mouth curling into a smile. They reached for me, their hands black with soot, their voices layered. "Join us." I turned and fled, stumbling through the glowing tunnel, the voices chasing me. My lamp flickered, shadows clawing at me. I could feel their breath on my neck, their hands brushing my shoulders. At last, I burst back into the main shaft, gasping, covered in dust. The others stared at me, their faces pale. "Where were you?" Henry whispered. I shook my head, unable to speak. But I knew I had been inside the heart of the mountain, and it had shown me my place among the names. The rules had delayed me this long, but now I had broken too many. I had looked where I should not look, listened where I should not listen, answered when I should not answer. There was only one part left to play, the part where the mountain took me.